Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Empower Sounds podcast. So, today we're going to talk about languages, and specifically, I'm going to tell you about my language learning journey because I think language is one of the most empowering things. And when you learn a language, not only do you learn a new way of speaking, but you also give yourself access to a whole new world of people, of experiences, of thinking, of culture, of music. And with a language such as Spanish, it's not just one country, but a whole host, a whole continent really that opens up to you. So I want to tell you guys how I went from zero in Spanish to fluent and my journey and how most of it was actually self-taught. And I'm making this because when I decided I wanted to learn Spanish, one of the first things I did was frantically YouTube how to learn Spanish and go on the internet and try and create a plan. So I'm hoping that by sharing my experiences, you guys have a roadmap and you can learn because I promise you it's possible. And not only is it possible, it's so fun. And also, it is extremely confidence boosting learning a language because it's such a beautiful, tangible way of seeing your progress as a person. And I used to think I was stupid for a long time because I went to quite a high pressure school and it put a lot of priority on maths and science, and I just didn't think I was very smart. But teaching myself a language from scratch reassured me that everyone has their things, and I just had to figure out a way that works for me to learn, and I really enjoy it. So I'm gonna tell you how I basically learned Spanish from zero to fluency and everything. This is going to be in two parts. I'm going to tell you how I got from zero to B1, which was mainly self-taught. And for anyone who's listening and doesn't know what a B1 is, a B1 is like an intermediate level Spanish. So anything that is like day-to-day conversations and like your general interactions and kind of getting by in a language. And then I'm going to tell you my journey because I moved to Spain this year and I lived in Spain for a year in Madrid, and it was the most incredible, fun year of my life. And obviously, living in Spain gave me the opportunity to improve my Spanish. But there was a few things that I did that helped me kind of intentionally go from a B1 to a C1, which, again, if you don't know, a C1 is so the European languages have like a learning framework and there's six levels. You have A, B, and C, and then each letter has two levels. So you have A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. And it's just like the way of categorizing fluency. And so A's are your kind of basic, B's are your intermediate, and C's are your advanced. And so when you have a B2 in a language, you're considered fluent. And then a C1 is an advanced fluency. And like I said, B1 gets you around and everything. So I'm going to basically give you my roadmap because when people ask me how I learned Spanish, I always jokingly say Netflix. And that is true, but there's a lot more to that story. So I want to share with you because I think it's one of my favorite things about my life that I can communicate in Spanish. I think it's opened up so much for me. And if anyone's listening and is on a language learning journey, like hit me up on the podcast Instagram. Let me know if anyone needs a Spanish learning speaking buddy, hit me up and we can practice together and let me know what your goals are because I think it's such a fun project to take on. And there's also this like thing of it's too late to learn languages and only kids are good at learning languages and you have to like learn as many as you can while you're a child. And although children find language learning more intuitive because they're still developing their brains and everything, I definitely think that you can learn a language at whatever point. And so I 100% urge anyone listening that's interested to take the plunge and just learn a language. And I'm going to tell you my journey. So before I tell you how I taught myself Spanish, I'm going to tell you why I taught myself Spanish. So as you know, my name is Mágica, which actually means magic in Spanish. I didn't know this until I started learning. I have always been a little bit fascinated by like the language and culture and also Latin culture, which also has Spanish influence, obviously, because of the language. I'd always been really into like music that was in Spanish, like different genres, reggaeton, merengue, cumbia, salsa, bachata. Um, but what really solidified to me the need to learn Spanish was when I was in high school, I went to a talk. I studied geography and I decided to go to a talk on migration, and it was about the US-Mexico border, and it was about women and their experiences and their struggles. And as a woman, as a migrant, that talk really stuck with me. It really resonated how blessed I am and how much I want to help other women who haven't been given the same opportunities I have. I had decided after this point that, wow, like I want to do this. I've always been really interested in language and the Spanish language and culture and everything. And so I decided that I was going to teach myself Spanish because the COVID pandemic was just starting and we had all been quarantined and I was alone in my room and I decided, like I can't leave anywhere. So I'm going to create this beautiful bubble for myself. And I tried to immerse myself in Spanish language, culture, Latin culture. So this is how I started my learning journey. I found things in my target language, so in Spanish, that I loved. Like I mentioned, I was really into the music. So I started making playlists of different genres, salsa, bachata, merengue, cumbia, reggaeton, everything. And I started making playlists and learning the lyrics to the songs and then actually writing down the lyrics of the songs and like translating them and like learning them because I also love to sing. So like learning to sing the songs. And I think songs are such a great tool because they're catchy and they're fun, but also they hold so much of the slang and the terms that you have in a language. Like sometimes in a grammar, I mean, oftentimes in a grammar textbook, let's not lie to ourselves. No one actually talks to like that. But in a song, again, I don't think if you're trying to learn English, Central C is the best way to go. However, I think finding slang and like a more natural way of speaking is definitely feasible through music. And I also just started watching a lot of Spanish Netflix. I did something which was quite difficult and honestly quite stupid because I didn't understand anything for the first long time was I just decided I'm going to watch it with Spanish subtitles. I will understand enough of what's happening in context, hopefully that I don't like need the subtitles. Now, although that was misguided because I did kind of struggle to understand what was happening. Um, it meant that I started to pick up a lot of the slang and words and everything. And I watched your classic Money Heist, Elite, Chicas de Cable, Valeria, Velvet, everything. And if you don't want to commit straight away to doing subtitles in your target language, you can watch something that you're willing to watch twice and watch it first, like it with your language that you understand. And then again, so you kind of know exactly what the plot is and you can just focus on the language. But if you find that boring, I would recommend just jumping in and seeing what happens because it's almost funny to make your own interpretation if you don't know exactly what's happening. Obviously, the more and more you understand it. And I remember the moment when I first started listening to songs and I was like, I understand what's happening and I don't have to look up the translation. And I'm watching shows and I'm understanding what's happening and I don't have to keep pausing every 5 seconds to Google what's going on. Um, so it's really fun. And also another thing, I recommend switching your phone to a language that you're trying to learn because intuitively we're always on our phones. We know most of the time what we're trying to do, like how to set an alarm, how to send a message and everything. Like you've kind of got it down by muscle memory. And so you kind of get to learn vocabulary that you definitely wouldn't find in a vocab textbook. Like when you're on Spotify and you're trying to add to the queue, like that's not in any of the grammar textbooks, but it's useful because imagine like you're going out and you're like, oh, like, can you add this to the queue when you're like at a house party or whatever, when you start interacting with natives and stuff. And that's, or like random words like shuffle or an alarm. And so I think that's a fun thing. I honestly had to keep switching between English and Spanish because getting stuff done and trying to learn the language were not conducive. But I think it's a fun way of immersing yourself. Also, I really liked audiobooks. I found actually reading resources in a target language that's not English really like tiring. And so I knew that if I tried to force myself to do that, I would stop liking the language, like because I would feel like it's too much effort and hard work to start off with. Now I really enjoy reading in Spanish, but I had to get to a level where I wasn't constantly Googling what I was trying to look up. And I think maybe it's just a personal thing, but I find listening slightly easier. So I think also understanding what kind of learner you are. So are you a visual learner or are you an auditory learner? Do you like learning through listening to stuff? Or are you a kinesthetic learner? Do you like learning by doing things? And figuring out like how can you make the process fun for you? Because I think if you make it really boring, it's really hard to stay consistent. And if you're not consistent, it's hard to get good. And I know for myself that when I tried to make it like a full exercise of I have to wake up and I have to do chapter this and this from this book, I stopped doing it because it was just not fun and it was too much work and I had too many other responsibilities on top of Spanish learning with my degree and my subjects in high school when I was doing it back in high school and all of the other things that were in life, like socially and personally and whatever. So my biggest advice with anything really, like yes, for languages, but any skill that you want to learn is to make it fun and also to make it social. Also, I see a few of my friends that have learnt Spanish also make this mistake where I think personally you should start speaking as soon as you know the basics. And so I grew up in a town where Spanish speakers aren't, let's just say they're not as common. It was a predominantly English speaking place, and most of the people that I knew spoke Spanish, didn't really speak Spanish, and also they did it as a subject, so they didn't want to do it leisurely and do extra work outside of their free time. So what I did was because I was in high school and one of my teachers was the one who inspired me to learn the language, I emailed her and I was like, hey, like, um, I'm teaching myself Spanish. Can you please help me? Does the school have any free resources that you can send me for grammar, for vocabulary? And also, can I practice with you? And so I 100% recommend that if you're listening and you're in school or you're at university, email your institution. Like I was not studying Spanish. However, I was a member of that school. And so I was like, hey, like help me out, please. And find someone to practice with you. Like my teacher was an angel. I loved her. She didn't actually teach me any subjects because I didn't do Spanish. But she was lovely and we met up and she said to me that she really liked my passion and she decided to give up her lunch times for the rest of the year. And so I practiced speaking with her every week. And honestly, I think that was game changing for me because learning to communicate and learning to just like express what I want to say from the bat rather than learning how to form like learn all the tenses and everything. Again, made it fun, made me feel like I was actually getting somewhere with the language. And obviously, if I could go back, one thing I would say is the grammar is important. So one mistake I definitely did make was I, because English, I think it's super, super vital to know how your language that you're trying to learn, so if it's Spanish, is different to your native language because English obviously has some similarities because it has influences in Latin and so does Spanish and whatever. But English, we don't have genders for nouns. So the table is the table, the bed is the bed, the curtain is the curtain. It's not la mesa or la ventana. So when I was learning vocabulary, I decided that the gender would just be redundant and I didn't learn the gender of anything. So definitely don't do that. I think you have to learn that what's important in your language and what's important in terms of the grammar in a different language will be different. But at the same time, as soon as you can start speaking, get on that because you'll build your confidence and also you'll get used to making errors and realizing that it's fine. Making mistakes is not the end of the world. Actually, by making mistakes, you learn because it's a really good way of reinforcing what not to do. So just make sure you're practicing with someone who can tell you that you're making mistakes. Because one thing you don't want to do is like learn something wrong because there was things that I learned again with gender and grammar that I like learned wrong because I didn't take the same time to do grammar as I did to speak and to work on my accent and my vocabulary and my slang. And so there were certain gender things that I had like mislearned. So make sure that you find someone who does actually know what they're talking about. And if you don't know anyone that speaks a language that you want to learn, there are a ton of platforms. You have italki, you have language learning platforms and apps. I will link some below in the description. All of the resources I mentioned, I will link down below. Also, I think when you learn to start speaking off the bat, you get used to um accents and learning not only to like speak with people who have different accents, which is so important if you're speaking a language like Spanish because there's so much diversity in the language, but also like improving your accent because I think one thing when I first moved to Spain that made me sound a lot more fluent and confident than I was in reality was my accent because I was making so many errors initially with my grammar, but because I had a reasonably good accent, people still didn't really notice. I think working on your accent is one of the best ways to feel more confident and fluent, like talking to other people. And ultimately, that's the goal of language learning, right? Like communicating with other people. So I would 100% recommend that. Now, my super life hack to getting to a point where you can speak to other people is learning the 80-20 rule. So you have this thing called the Pareto principle, and again, it's applied to anything in life, not just language learning, where 80% of the results come from 20% of the work. No, I'm not telling you to like shortcut, but actually you don't have to sit down and learn every single grammatical tense and every single piece of vocabulary before you're ready to communicate with people. They say that if you learn the 1,000 most commonly spoken words day to day conversationally, you have access to a pretty broad range of day to day conversations. So learning important words like and because and the are more valuable, which is why although I love platforms like Duolingo and stuff, it's maybe not the best because it doesn't prioritize high frequency words. It kind of does it categorically. So I think if you learn words that are useful to you and also just general used in day-to-day language is really important. And I'm gonna find a list of the 1,000 most spoken words in Spanish, and if I can find a link to the thing, I'll link it down below. But if not, just Google it and you will find a list. And you can make flashcards, or if you have Anki or Quizlet or Memrise, they have ready-made flashcards on this. And if you set aside like 10, 15 minutes a day, you could learn the deck in a month or 2 months. And then you have like a lot of the essential vocab. Also, with vocab, if your goal is to communicate with other people, learn words that are important to you. Learn how to talk about your interests rather than learning the name of every sport if you don't play sport. Learn how to talk about your hobbies or learn how to talk about what you like watching, what music you like, what you're studying. The reason I say this is it's important to learn more vocabulary than just your individual life because you want to understand other people as well and you want to be able to have like diverse conversation. However, if you learn to talk about yourself, you'll be able to communicate how you feel and express yourself more readily. And that's really motivating. And I think like if you teach yourself in a way where you see results as you're learning, it's really like it helps with the whole motivation piece because it's really hard to stay consistent with something like a language because it takes time. It doesn't take as long as you might think, but it also you can't unfortunately airdrop a language into your brain overnight, and I really wish you could because I would love that. I would do it with all of the languages, but it's not it's not something that it doesn't work like that. And so I think setting yourself up to have little anecdotes. And what I did actually was I had like it's a bit cringe, but I had a private story. And I added every one of my friends that could speak Spanish, and I would literally just post the most random things about my life. And I would like add Spanish captions on it, thinking that I had a funny personality. But I got used to like learning how to joke, and it again made it so much easier when I moved to Spain, making friends with locals and natives and like immersing myself into the culture. So I think first learn the 1,000 most common words and then learn vocabulary relevant to you, and then you can learn how to say all of the household cleaning items and also as well as learning the vocabulary, grammatical tenses are really important when learning a language. And there's a lot of them, and often you use specific tenses for specific contexts. Like you have different past tenses. And that's one thing I realized with Spanish as well. Like there's different past tenses and you're meant to use them for different contexts. So if you just ate something, it would be different to if you ate something when you were a kid, like, and you used to eat it every day for breakfast. Or if you've just eaten something is different to again what you ate for dinner yesterday. And so that's complicated and it's a lot of like memorization and learning endings and all that stuff. So what I would recommend is learn the present tense and then learn one future tense and one past tense. And I'm not saying stop your learning there because you do, once you progress, learn to use the other tenses and stuff. But if you can give yourself the basics to start communicating, it gives you motivation to keep adding on. And I would recommend starting to like write or keep a journal or whatever because I didn't do any writing practice when I was learning. And I found it really difficult when I first got to Spain to like start writing and doing stuff and everything in my language. And also, if you decide to take any of the language exams to test your level, if you teach yourself, there is a writing part. So, what I would recommend, instead of keeping a language journal, which can be tedious, again, you can translate songs, you can write other lyrics and whatever, but also you have autocorrect on your phone, right? So if you add whatever target language you're trying to speak onto your keyboard, you can text people, you can write into your notes app just like a few sentences every day or like once a week or whatever frequency works for you. And it will tell you if you're making mistakes because again, you don't want to be learning like wrong grammar and like it's kind of tedious to like write something with paper and then write it into Google Translate and check if you've like done it wrong and everything. So use your tools and also in terms of apps. So dictionary, there's an app called Spanish Dict. I'm gonna link it down below. It's really good. As a translator, you have DeepL, obviously, you have Reverso, you have Anki for flashcards, you have Quizlet, you have Memrise. Um, and so just have a little and often practice. Like if you're like, I'm going to, for example, when you're learning vocabulary, learn 20 words today, and I'm gonna write a little text message with the words that I've learned today is enough. Like rather than I'm gonna study for 2 hours every day and whatever. Like if you do it little and often, it's more sustainable. Like you can find ways to integrate it into your normal life. Like if you do your yoga practice like on YouTube in the mornings, find a video in Spanish and then you can just like watch the instructions. Or like if you're doing your workout videos in your language that you're trying to learn. Or if you're like cooking, okay, this is a bit more complicated because of measurements and everything. And I never follow recipes, which is why I can't cook. But just finding random stuff that fits into your life. Like I would do this thing where when I would eat, before I could eat, I would have to like mentally tell myself, do I know how to say everything that's on my plate? And if I didn't, I just quickly look it up, and that's how I learned a lot of the food vocabulary because I'm a big foodie and I wanted to be able to talk about all the things and the food that I like and stuff. And so find that with yourself. Like if you're working out in the gym and you're like, okay, do I know how to say this? Do I know how to say arm? Do I know how to say leg? Do I know how to say back? All of this kind of stuff. And even the like the muscles and whatever, if you want to go that deep into it, just like personalize it for you because everyone's language learning journey is different because everyone's interest in what they want to communicate and the personality that they want to bring forth in this new language is entirely different. So I think use the tips that you can find online and even with this podcast, like listen to it, but really make it your own. And I think that's a really big part of it as well. Like set yourself language goals. So that can be anything. That can be taking a language exam and being like, I want to get to this level. It can be, I want to be able to have a 10-minute conversation with a speaker in this thing. Or it could be, I want to be able to write a diary entry about something. Or I want to be able to go on holiday and be able to order without feeling embarrassed or like make small talk with locals or like whatever. If you set your like language goal, it's so much more motivating to see how you're making progress towards that rather than kind of aimlessly. Because I found that was difficult when I first started learning Spanish. It was like really it's obviously a whole language, right? And there's like so many resources on the internet and there's so much to learn and you're never going to be 100% fluent. And I found that quite a lot. And so like breaking it down little by little helped me go from zero to a B1. So I basically did all of these things that I'm telling you about. And then I decided to take a B1 exam because I was thinking of studying abroad and I wanted to have some proof that I can speak some Spanish. And so I took a language exam to test how it was doing. And I was so anxious before that exam. And honestly, I didn't study for it. I went salsa dancing the night before and I thought that was going to be my revision. I spoke to some people in Spanish and everything. And it was a humbling experience, but it was also really reassuring because I realized there's a difference between doing a test and learning a language. But like sometimes if you pass the test, you know you're on the right page and you don't need to do a test. Like you can do whatever you want, but I wanted to have the paperwork, and so I did this thing called a Dele exam. And if anyone has any questions about the Dele exam, again, you can hit up the podcast Instagram account, shoot me a DM, you can ask me questions. I'll let you know my experience and how it was. And also, I'm gonna link down some resources and podcasts and stuff that I listened to prepare for that because that's another thing. Like I really tried to make the language a part of my life. And now I think that it really is. And it's a really big part of like who I am. And I know that sounds dramatic, but honestly, learning this language and learning more about the culture associated with this language and the different places that it comes from has opened up some of the best experiences, opportunities, people, and moments for me. And so I hope that it gives you that as well. Like I said, please feel free to message me and let me know about your journey. Let me know about what language goals you have. We can talk about it together. I'm actually starting learning German right now. So if we have any German speakers that are listening to this, please hit me up and we can be language buddies. And just remember that you're not alone and that learning a language opens up a whole new community of potential friends, potential, I don't know, lovers, family, um, stories, whatever. So good luck, enjoy, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll speak soon.